Europe is really important to me.
British people 58 years ago were duped.
Why don't Volkswagen and BMW and everything come to this lovely country called Ireland? You would have no capacity to negotiate against that because you've walked out.
We are a more important marketplace to Europe than Europe is to us.
Free trade is a two-way agreement. Why should they trade with us?
Because we import more than we export. That's what it comes to, and I have to say to somebody, I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to drive a Mercedes, you're going to have to drive a Jaguar. Britain industry will step up and take its place.
I find it really difficult listening to all this because it seems a lot as us versus Europe, and it shouldn't be like this.
Welcome to Nottingham and to the Adams Room in the Nottingham Conference Centre. We're here to debate a particularly important part of the constitutional project, which is the relationship with Europe. Should we just leave the European Union completely or subjugate ourselves to it, or try and do something else? And what about human rights, this European Convention on Human Rights? Surely a constitution will have to say something about that. We've got a specially organised focus group here. We've brought them together, representatives from local parties, prospective candidates, and students and others who've come in from the general public to debate these issues. So let's get straight into the debate. David, introduce yourself, and could you tell me what Europe means to you? But first tell us, as it were, the backstory.
Okay, the backstory first. 35 years in the army. Came out, looked around, didn't like the way the country was going. I'd spent 35 years defending democracy, not practicing it. And I wasn't particularly impressed with the way that those who had been practicing it had taken our country and the state it had become. So I looked around and decided that UKIP was the only party which actually shared, or I shared a view with, in terms of the European project.
What does Europe mean to you?
Europe to me is not just, it's not the continental shelf for Europe. Europe, to me, and what I want to leave, is the whole of the institutions of Europe. British people 58 years ago were duped. They thought they were entering a free trade agreement to open up the markets. Actually, the European Communities Act 1972 gave force to the law that said all European law and any future law would be supreme over the laws made in this country, which therefore put Europe sovereign over our parliament.
And I'm going to be asking at the end of this what you would put about Europe in the Constitution. And I strongly suspect, David, that your answer would be nothing.
Nothing. Europe does not have a position in our Constitution. And if that means that we have to repeal 72, then we leave.
And just to clarify, there are these two Europes I mentioned at the start. The European Union,
supranational state.
That's the 1972 Act, and that's out. Yep. But you'd also say about the human rights thing, which is separate, more countries, the European Convention on Human Rights with the European Court, you'd say no to that too.
We would say no to that. I don't think this country actually needs somebody else to tell us about human rights. I think we have a very good record. But if it requires that we would then put a Bill of Rights in place, then UKIP policy is that we are prepared to put a Bill of Rights in place to replicate.
So it's not anti-rights?
No,
it's
absolutely.
More get this European thing out of the way.
Neither is it. Let's get out of Europe and we're going to throw away the free trade. You know, to be honest, we are in a balanced trade deficit. So actually, we are a more important marketplace to Europe than Europe is to us.
Thank you, David. Kat, tell us who you are, and Tony is beside you. Both of you represent the same party. I'd be interested in whether you share this view.
Europe is really important to me. I'm from Germany, my family lives in Italy, and I've enjoyed the free movement, and I feel that we've had now 70 years of peace in Europe after two terrible world wars. And that was very important to stay and work with other countries to ensure we enjoy this peace and also the rights that Europe brings, the EU brings to our country.
So the Greens' position on the European Union, this is the one that got going earlier and so on, is support and constitutional supremacy.
Yes, we do. We are in support of the EU, however, it needs to be reformed. We would like to have a referendum to give the British people the choice, but we would like also to have an open debate so people are informed about all the benefits that we are getting and enjoying. We would like also a written constitution for Britain and Europe to be, and the human rights actually, to be central within that.
Mm-hmm. Antonia, you're also a Green Party candidate.
Yes, for Nottingham East. Europe does need reform. It needs to be more democratic, less centralised, and also less corporate. Environmental legislation, workers' rights legislation, the possibility of banking reform, which is very important, need Europe, but a reformed Europe, and us to have a strong place in it with our own voice, so that people, it's something that's happening with people, not something that's happening to people.
Can you have something in a constitution subject to reform?
I think I'm one of the few people here that who actually voted in 1975 in the referendum.
Yeah, we already had a referendum here, didn't we, after we entered the European Union?
And I've seen the European Union evolve over that time. As the world gets more globalised, as we get bigger corporations, we need bigger democratic bodies to exert that sort of power. And people talk about rights in the UK, but we're talking about rights across Europe. It's not just for us as UK or Britain, it's what do we contribute to the rest of Europe. I think Europe will evolve, and yes, it ought to be part of our constitution, and things will evolve like constitutions do evolve.
The trouble is, I think, David, that there's an awful lot more countries in Europe than there used to be. It's whatever it is, 27? 28. So how can you be sure that the British voice will be listened to?
If you're a member of any club, any organisation, you have to be prepared to lose the vote. So as a country, Britain needs to be part of the European Union, needs to be working with it, but we won't win everything, we'll lose some things, and you have to accept it's part of the democracy, part of a wider democracy. If we lose a vote, if the other 27 countries go one way, we have to just accept it.
And move along, and win this and lose that, and win this
Yes.
and lose that.
And pay £65 million a day for the privilege.
70 years of peace, I think.
Not through the European Union.
No, but I think it's a very
NATO.
important thing
Yeah,
to
Wait,
point
David,
out.
Soviet
Thank
bloc
you.
No, David, wait.
I think that's really, really important. And talking about human rights,
We'll talk about human rights in a minute. We're going to get onto the European Convention in a minute. I'm interested in this claim that European Union has delivered peace.
Well, I think if we are sitting around a table with our neighbours and negotiate and discuss policies and law that actually affect all of us, are absolutely essential that we're working together. Climate has got no borders. Banking, and the free trade has got no borders. We need to work with other countries. It is absolutely illusionary to say, okay, we live in this international world, but we are not actually working democratically with our neighbours together. I don't think it works. You can't have the one side of the coin without the other.
And crime. There's international crime. There's a huge amount of different issues that need to be addressed. If we're not even in Europe, how do we make sure that Britain's voice is heard? There's an idea that if we left Europe, Europe would no longer have any power over us. We're not part of America. America still has a huge amount of influence over us.
Right.
These are our neighbours. It's better to be, and working together is one of the best ways to avoid conflict.
Okay, there is something left to just notice, which is the relative relationships between the European Union and the United Kingdom. David mentioned earlier the 1972 European Communities Act and joining the European Union. It is true that acts of Parliament are rendered unenforceable where they are inconsistent with European law. This was postponed and postponed for years, but then there was a big case involving, of all things, Spanish fishing vessels. And we didn't want them, we being the British, in our water. And we told them to go away. And they said, you can't make us go away because European law allows us to fish here. And in the end, they were right. So, Michael, parliamentary sovereignty, the big deal that you will have learned in law here, is, in a way, we might dislike it or we might like it, is dead, isn't it?
Parliamentary sovereignty has historically been the real tenet of British governments, to say that on all matters, Parliament has ultimate authority and makes the final decision. However, in the areas where the British government has ceded its authority or its power to Europe, its decisions are prime. And we've seen this across the whole host of decisions where the European Union has implemented its regulations and its directives, and the British government has had to follow suit.
But if we're going to write a constitution, we have to put something up there which says, like the Irish did when they joined the European Union is top dog. Would you be in favour of something like that?
Again, I think that the fact that we would be able to do that, in a sense, represents the supremacy of Parliament itself. Parliament is itself ceding power to Europe that it can take back by repealing that act or constitution or making an amendment.
Okay.
So we are willingly giving away power that we can take back.
Good point. So we could have a constitution and then we could change the constitution. Just like we currently, and you'd like to do it, repeal the 1972 Act. Let's hear from some of the other colleagues we've got in the group this morning. Are you inclined, any of you, towards David's clear position? You may disagree with it, but clear it is. You may agree with it. Or are you more inclined to see the, if I may say so, the Green Labour Alliance, which is really, one of the Greens is looking pained. What do we think about it? The European Union and sovereignty.
If Britain is going to carry on punching above its weight in international affairs, we need to be part of this big club. China won't necessarily pick up our calls anymore. America won't pick up our calls if we're not part of this big group that can, throw the clout of 500 million people, the largest economic zone in the world. I think that's really important to Britain's power in the world. And I say that from a Liberal Democrat perspective, by the way.
Are you running for Parliament?
No, absolutely not. But
as well as everybody else in this room?
No.
My view is that if UK wants to get benefited from the whole world overall, this membership with the European Union is highly important.
Where are you from?
I'm from Bangladesh.
Bangladesh. Business in Bangladesh, India is the big market.
Yes.
Does the European Union matter? I mean, you can't speak for the whole of India, you're not even from India, but Bangladesh.
Yes.
Does Europe matter, do you think, to business?
The free market benefits of India or Bangladesh, at least in the textile department, for example. It's highly important that UK is a member of the European Union, because once anything comes to this country, it can be sold anywhere within the European Union under preferential tariffs and others.
Yeah, so it makes a difference. I mean, we're all, as usual, if I may say so, David, ganging up on David and UK. Is there anybody here who's saying, I agree with that, David. I'm not going to put my hand up because I'm a bit embarrassed, but I agree with David. We're better off out of Europe. Any takers for that position over here? Say who you are, sir, and give us your point of view.
My name's Simon Knighton. I'm a local businessman. I generally believe that by remaining a member, as long as we can sort a lot of the financial positions out that are currently not working, then it is good for free trade. And as long as constitutional law can be changed within the UK from a European perspective to benefit us, then it's still a new thing, Europe, and we need to continue to work with it.
Interesting. I'm going to push you a little bit on it, because we had Councillor David saying, in the end, if you go into a negotiation and you lose, you have to accept that. So do we say we will continue as members as long as it goes exactly as we want, in a way, the financial discussions and so on work for us, or do we say we belong even though we don't win everything in Europe? Would you be prepared to accept that?
You have to be somewhat democratic in that situation, and you have to accept that you cannot win every battle that you go into. That would be my position on that. You have to lose some.
Yeah, so broadly speaking, with Councillor David. Kat, and then we'll go to David to see whether you can persuade this lot. We'll do a straw poll after you've spoken, but Kat first on this point about Europe and indispensability of Europe in a way.
I find it really difficult listening to all this, because it seems a lot as us versus Europe, and it shouldn't be like this. We need to think about what is our aim. Now, there are certain areas like climate change, surely we all want to address, because it's the future of our children. Banking reform. So we cannot think about, okay, let's try to get the best deal for Britain. We want equality. We want to prevent the worst of environmental crisis. That is something that is good for all of us. So we need to work together rather than saying, let's get a good deal just for Britain, just for us and our businessmen. That's not how it should be.
Right, so that sounds very strongly European sovereignty. David, now, you see, the argument is that we leave the European Union. So the constitution of the United Kingdom is a free, independent, sovereign state called the United Kingdom.
Correct.
Now, what about all this stuff we're hearing about business, about climate?
Absolutely.
Are you going to tell me we will do all these negotiations which will make us just the same but without bureaucracy?
Britain can negotiate just like anybody else can.
So Matthew's wrong. We'll punch above our weight without the
We
European
have always
Union.
punched above our weight. Britain has a P5 position. Britain has
P5,
a
UN, top dollar, 1 of 5.
permanent
that can
5
veto
Security
stuff.
Council.
That's an accident of war,
That's
isn't it?
an accident of policy. But we maintain that policy.
What
So
about the business people?
business? It's a World Trade Organization. You know, Australia punches above its weight. It has got a free trade agreement already with China and Japan. Have we? No, because
Yeah,
we've
quite-
got to go through Europe.
Quite far away. I mean, Australia's
It's
not the answer.
It's a world trade. You can get around here.
87 free trade agreements already.
we-
87 Britain
but
has.
Britain can-
and that's
Wait,
outside
Kat,
of
wait, Kat,
Europe.
let
Britain
David have
can
his
do,
say.
you know, its own trade arrangements. And that is our view. And you talk about Britain's position in Europe. The real conflict at the moment is the Ukraine. That is a real danger to the European shelf, caused by a stupid policy from the EU that tried to engage Ukraine into the EU and just ignored the Putin position of a buffer state. But who are the players in it? Frau and France.
No David Cameron.
No David
No
Cameron.
David Cameron.
Not a
This is
British
your
thing.
ideal. Your ideal is that
He's
they're
not
never there.
He's not there because
Because they follow too much UKIP stuff.
does he?
Well, I mean,
No.
we all know he's imitating UKIP to try and win power off
all
the
of the
back of a
parties that
seepage
say
of your
that they
vote.
can reform, unless they get agreement from the other 27 countries on all of the issues of free trade, free movement of people, free movement of goods, free movement of service, unless they get that, unless they accept, well, they have to accept that we've already lost our supremacy to Europe. I mean, look at the prisoners' votes.
Well, we get on to the...
did
we get on-
everybody go,
no,
whoa, we're
we'll
not
get
going
on
to
to the
give
human
our
rights
votes
thing.
to the
No,
prisoners?
we'll get on to the human rights thing in a
Europeans
minute.
have said, on your bike.
Now, what about, you see, you look at Greece. You look at Greece.
Look at Greece.
Greece is saying, we want X.
They want
and a
to
bunch of other
renegotiate.
countries are saying, actually, we don't fancy giving it to
Correct.
you. Supposing Mr. Farage became the key guy in the foreign secretary, and he said to all these countries, he said, we'd rather like to have a free trade agreement with Europe because we think you're marvellous, just like we think New Zealand is marvellous,
Yeah.
and Greenland.
Yeah.
And they say, well, actually, we'd just as soon not. And then the
Okay.
Irish put their hands up and say, why don't Volkswagen and BMW and everything come to this lovely country called Ireland? You would have no capacity to negotiate against that because you've walked out.
Do you really think,
Yeah.
in the world of trade, that BMW, Aldi's,
Perfectly
Citroën,
possible.
well, what would happen then?
They'd
Then the industries within the UK would create those goods which they didn't import.
Right.
At the moment, this country is a net exporter of billions of
Yes.
pounds
Yes.
going around the world.
Yeah, but you'd be prepared to look that in the face.
If
because
that's
you'd have
what
to.
it comes, absolutely. If that's what it comes to, and I have to say to somebody, I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to drive a Mercedes. You're going to have to drive a Jaguar. So be it.
And
So be it. So be
It's
it.
just
Good job. They'll all be doing
bizarre.
so well under
You know,
the
and
UK
the
government.
Jaguar plant will be going bigger to replace
Yeah.
all of the Mercs
Yeah,
that we
okay.
currently
So a little
buy.
bit of pain in the short term, but a resurgent Britain.
Britain industry will step up and take its place.
Do you recognise this Britain, Michael? Is this what you'd want? This kind of Britain? A Britain which has gone through some pain, but which has emerged the other end
But I don't
as
think
an
you'll get there.
independent
I
nation?
don't think we'll
Okay,
lose
fair
the
point,
trade.
fair point.
I'm
Then hang in there.
I'm not sure it is in reality a Britain that is achievable. I think that if we were to withdraw from the European Union, we'd lose 4 or 5 fundamental freedoms economically that make a big difference to the way people invest. The free movement of goods, capital, services, persons, and the right to assemble a company in a different country, which have really increased the amount of European businesses which are working in this country, and significantly the export of skills to the continent.
There is a bit of a Labour sentiment in favour of this, isn't there? A bit of renegotiation. It's always been the air with Labour Party.
I think over the years, Labour's often been ambivalent about Europe. Business is not just the entrepreneurs, not just the shareholders, not the directors. Business and the people who make wealth in this country are all the workers and the people in these industries. And it's not just a businessman's club. It's all the people working together. I mean, I suppose I'm a fundamental internationalist. You know, I would like to see all of Europe wealthy, all of Europe, you know, Greece and the rest, everybody with the same level of human rights, with the same level of income, the same wealth.
So a happy land.
So a happy land, yes.
Well, I can see how you won the council election. You're a man who believes in nirvana around the corner.
But I'd rather work towards that the work towards the Little Englander, back to the past.
It's not Little England.
That we get
I
from...
want that, but for Bangladesh as well, and for India and for Pakistan.
Wait a sec, we'll hear from you. There's a microphone coming just behind you.
I've been running manufacturing small industry for 30 years, that sort of thing, and I can't imagine a situation where I would try to make it more difficult for me to trade with my foreign customers and them to trade with me. That's what UKIP David here is proposing.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
No,
because
I'm just saying we have to renegotiate our free trade agreements.
Yes, but free
That's
trade,
all.
free trade is a two-way agreement. You have to have one way. They have to agree to trade with you, as you have to agree to trade with them. And if they've got a choice of preferring their people within Europe, they'll do that if it's more difficult to do somewhere else. Why should they trade with us? There's no reason.
Because we support...
David.
We import more than we export.
Supposing they said this to you. This is a very precise thing. It's often mentioned, and they use the example of Norway. They say, you can have a free trade agreement with us, absolutely delighted, you've left Europe and so on. You have to agree every single European regulation, or we won't let you in. What would you do in answer to that? Would you sign on the dotted line for that agreement?
No.
So you wouldn't be able to conclude it. You see, that would be the risk, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Personally, I wouldn't sign that.
Why should Germany have huge social costs? Wait a sec. Why should Germany have huge social costs in the production of their Volkswagens when Britain can have cheap labour, they can have 0-hour contracts, they can produce much cheaper stuff, and then they can swamp the German market? Why would they accept that?
No. Well, I don't accept the premise that we would, throw away all of the workers' time regulations. I mean, that again is this argument that as soon as you say we're against Europe, that means we're going to get rid of everything. And when we talk about, the European and the Norways, let's not forget the Greeks. I think one of the biggest fears for Europe is that the Greeks eventually say, well, actually, if you're not going to renegotiate us, if we can't have control of our currency levers in order that we can, sort our austerity out and our country out, we're going to leave Europe. I think their biggest fear is actually they will leave Europe and they will do all right.
Right. I said to you I wanted you to think about what you would put in the Constitution on the European Union. I'm going to do this because I want to move on to human rights, different issue.
Yes.
It's a different issue. But basically, there's a very simple question, and it's compulsory voting, actually, in this particular part of the written Constitution. The clause like this: Britain shall remain a member of the European Union until such time as the people of Britain vote to leave in a referendum, and while members of said union, European law shall be supreme where relevant. How many of you would accept that kind of European supremacy, let's not dodge it, in a written constitution? Hand up.
I want to put something...
An amendment.
I want to put
immensely briefly.
Yes, because
Green Party pedantry.
We cede everything. If we give Europe power, it's our power to give.
And to take back. Wait,
it's not.
And yes, it is.
Completely not.
Wait, David, wait.
In terms of the different legislations, it is largely our power to cede and to take back.
You say, last word for you before we go to the vote, we've got, you say once given away, you can't get it back.
It has been given away. You can only regain parliamentary supremacy and sovereignty, because we don't have it at the moment.
By leaving.
By leaving.
Right.
By repealing the 72 Act.
Now, you've got your motion. I'm not accepting any more amendments. Voting is compulsory. How many of you could live with the suggestion in the Constitution as a statement that European law in relevant areas is supreme? How many? My hand is not up, I'm merely waving. We have everybody on this side except one. Sir, in the blue, have we got a hand? We have a hand down, we have no hand. And then those who would say no to that, having heard this discussion. One, David, and we have you, sir.
A lot of Britain, I mean, looking at how many people turn out to vote, vote more strongly for the British elections rather than Europe in numbers. And I think, was it Kat said, that other countries in Europe see it more as Europe together, whereas in Britain we don't at the moment.
So if you were in a pub in New York and somebody said, where are you from, mate? Would you say, I'm English? Would you say, I'm British? Would you say, I'm European?
I'd say I was English.
English. Yeah. Did you come with him? Did you come with him this morning, or are you separate? Well, are you shocked by his view?
I'm sort of undecided. I agree that we should idealistically look to be Europe rather than just England.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm undecided.
The beauty of our project is that we don't come with a preordained view. The People's Constitution that we're drafting through this website can generate unstoppable momentum for positions which are developed by people outside the mainstream.
I don't think Britain has got very much to learn from Europe about human rights.
All humans should be treated the same.
Do we always trust our governments?
The Strasbourg European Court of Human Rights has been really effective in bringing some old rules of British law really up to speed with modern trends.
I think it could be a worrying trend of losing power over law to unelected judges in Strasbourg.
Parliament is the only organisation within the British Constitution that can make laws and can set aside laws. Parliament is supreme. British courts will make those decisions.
I'm very uncomfortable with the line, particularly David's taking, sort of the little Englander, that we've nothing...
It's Great Britain, actually, but,
The little Great Britain has less of a ring to it.
I'm British.